All right, giving feedback. You guys have probably received feedback on things every now and then and thought, that wasn't very useful. That wasn't very helpful. Um, Feedback, giving good feedback is a tricky kind of thing. And it's a very valuable thing though. So that's the first thing I want to say to you here is that many of you are going to go on in your careers and you're going to become managers or you're going to supervise teams of people, and a real superpower of a manager is the ability to create an atmosphere where their team members' input is valued, but also that these team members are open to growth. They're open to learning ways in which they can be improved. And often the real source of that improvement comes from regular feedback sessions. So maybe yearly sessions where you as a manager sit down with your team and you highlight the things you like about what they did, but you also focus on areas where you see potential for improvement. And it's such a tricky game to play. So I sometimes, like to throw things out. If you were going out to some event and you had a good friend or, even your significant other going out with you, and as you were going out, you thought they weren't dressed right for that event, but they seem quite happy about it. What do you do? Do you tell them? Do you say, you shouldn't wear that? Probably if it's a really close friend, maybe you will. Maybe you have friends that you've got that sort of close with. But quite often, even the thought of doing that makes us start to go, ooh, I better be careful how I word this. I don't want to offend them. And this is the trick with feedback. It is possible to offend somebody by highlighting things they're not doing optimally. In fact, I would suggest to you that is the natural consequence. It is the fight or flee system. It's the sympathetic nervous system. When you say to somebody, your work is not as good as it could be, that feels a little bit like I'm being criticized, which is sort of like I'm being attacked. And the sympathetic nervous system is very sensitive. And it will kick up that sort of fight or flee. Like, no, I don't agree with you, or I'm not even going to listen to you. And so, of course, if you want them to learn and grow, they have to listen to you, and they shouldn't be fighting you. They should be thinking about what you're suggesting and really trying to use that to inform how they grow, how they learn and grow. A lot of whether that happens depends on how you deliver the feedback. You have to be sensitive to the emotions that feedback provokes in order to do it well. So what I want to do is give you guys a little bit of a sense. So you are now going to go through and you're going to see these activities your peers have done. I think I'm just going to ask you to do two things with each, but I'm going to ask you to do the two things well to get you thinking about feedback. So the first thing is the power of positive feedback. Some people have asked me why I became a professor. I became a professor, ultimately, the real causal instance that I remember is a professor that I took a course with, took me aside at one point after seeing some of my work that I'd done and said, Steve, you think like a scientist. I think you really have the mental approach that a scientist needs. And this is a path you should be following because you're doing a really good job at creating, I was creating hypotheses that led to predictions that we could test. And, that guy was so important to me and his words were surprising to me. I didn't necessarily know I was good at doing this. And he highlighted it and suggested, in fact, that I spend an extra year in undergraduate to get my marks up so I could go on and be a scientist. His positive feedback was so powerful that it changed the course of my life, quite honestly. And many of us can tell a story like that. By the way, his name is Wayne Donaldson. I'm going to say his name out loud. So step one for each peer, positive feedback. Look at what they said and try your best within there to find something that you think they did really well. Some point where they were very clear about things or where they showed the relevance of something, something that they did well. And don't make it something fluffy. Don't make it like, it read nice. Try to come up with some specific thing that they are doing well. And you're going to see specificity of feedback is important. Some specific thing where you can say, hey, this part of what you did, It's really good. Excellent. You should keep doing that. That's very important to help them learn what they're doing well, because we often don't see these things in ourselves, which will be a bit of a theme of this peer scholar activity as we go through a little bit as well. But then there's the next part. And the next part will be what I will call constructive feedback. Constructive meaning to make better, to improve, right? Constructing a building, making it stronger, etc. And that is the goal of constructive feedback. So when you're doing that, first of all, let me be very clear about what I want you to do. You look at a peer's work, and I want you to look at it almost like you're a coach. You know, somebody who is there to help this person improve their work. And so you're going to look at it, and I want you to think of all of the ways it could be better. But then I want you to zoom in on the one thing that if they improved, you think that would be the maximum way they could improve their overall work, right? So don't try to tell them 5 things they can improve, because that's just too overwhelming. Plus, they're going to hear from a bunch of peers anyway. So try to focus in on one thing that they could improve that you think would have a big effect on their work. This is going to require critical thinking of you, by the way, to figure out what that one thing is. So read it very carefully. I call that receptive communication. Think very hard about, you know, what thing needs improvement. That's critical thinking. Okay, once you figure that out, then I want you to think about how it could be improved. So that's creative thinking, by the way. You know, what could they do or what should they do? And so try again to be specific, specificity of feedback. Try to come up with a clear recommendation that you can give this peer. Okay. And now ultimately, so you've now thought of what needs to be improved. You've thought of how it could be improved. And now the last thing you're going to do is you're going to express this all to the peer. But what I want you to be clear about again is that if you do this wrongly, if you do this too abruptly or too negatively, you could just produce a fight or flight reflex. So you have to be respectful. And what I mean by that is just, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, make sure your feedback is about the work, not about the person. So you don't say you have this problem. No, this is a problem with your composition. And let's talk about your composition, because together we're trying to work on your composition. Make sure your feedback is forward thinking, future oriented, it's sometimes called. It's about improving this work. It's not about problems with this work. It's like, how can we make this better? So you're very future oriented, and you're giving your comments in the spirit of helping the student improve their work. And the third thing is back to that specificity, or sometimes called actionable. Make sure your feedback is clear in terms of suggesting what they should do. What exactly could this person do to improve their work? When you give feedback to each of these peers, we're going to look for that. We're going to look, have you clearly identified, and we're mostly going to look at your constructive feedback. I'll be clear about that. And we're going to ask, did you clearly specify some issue that needs addressing? And did you give this person some clear, actionable feedback about how that could be improved? That's what the TAs are going to look for, and they're going to look for that in every peer that you give feedback to. So if you want to do well on this activity, you know, take that very seriously and really think about each work and give them feedback, and make sure again that it's about the work and not the person, that it's future oriented. And that it's worded in a pro-social way, so you're trying to help this person improve, and finally that it's actionable, that it's got a clear sense of what this person should do. Those are the characteristics we're going to look for in the feedback. In fact, when you see your feedback, I'm going to ask you to rate it on those bases that I just discussed. And I'm also going to ask you to indicate the emotions the feedback made you feel. So eventually you're going to see the emotions your feedback generated. And you're going to be able to see what your peers thought about the feedback you gave. And so I really want you to try to do this as well as you can. And hopefully I was clear in this video about exactly what it is we're looking for there. Okay, if you need to, watch this video again before you start giving feedback, or even in between each peer, just to make sure you're doing things right. Cool. Leave you there. One more video to go, a little below.